right. Hello, everyone. Hello. This morning's sessions have set the stage for me. You've heard the word fear come up a number of times from Chisholm, from Laurie, from Tandy and Chisholm just now as well. So are you ready to explore what you might be afraid of? Yeah? Okay, that's good. So we're going to start here. We're here in 2024, and while we have made progress when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're not quite where we'd like to be. Now, if you were to go back in time to the early 1900s, that was a time when women were fighting for the right to vote. Or perhaps to the mid-1900s, that was a time when the Pride movement and the Civil Rights movement were gaining traction. And if you'd asked someone at that time to predict what equality would have looked like in the year 2024, what do you think that they would have said? It's quite likely that they would have predicted equality for all. And yet here we are in 2024 when we simply know that that is not the case. In fact, if we look at news headlines from around the world, you will probably see evidence of this real resistance and backlash to diversity, equity, and inclusion, with influential leaders like Elon Musk saying that DEI must die. And so the question is, why do we see this backlash? Why are we seeing this resistance in society and in our workplaces? Now, research shows us that this backlash actually comes because, or arises because, we see diversity, equity, and inclusion as a threat. And you might be wondering, well, a threat to what? Well, a threat to a number of things. A threat to our culture, to our beliefs, to our values, to our position, and even to meritocracy. And so what is the human response to threat? Well, it evokes in us a range of different emotions. Everything from feeling, and I'd love my slide to change now, yes, feeling terrified, helpless, scared, frightened, anxious, a dread, feeling weak, feeling this edginess. And at the core of all of these emotions is the very core human primary emotion of fear. When it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, there's plenty of fear. Those who are from well-represented groups are fearful, and those who are from underrepresented groups are also fearful. Those of us working in the DEI space are fearful, and those aspiring to be inclusive leaders are also fearful. Fear is the elephant in the room, if you'd like, that none of us want to talk about. In our toxically positive workplaces and society, we are even fearful of fear itself. So I've spent the last 2 years unpacking fear, doing research to try to understand where this fear comes from, how does it show up, and how do we let go of this fear? So my research shows us that there are 5 things that we're fearful of when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. The first is that we're actually fearful of change. We fear doing things differently. We're fearful of losing our position, space, and power that we have enjoyed. We're also fearful of getting it wrong, of saying and doing the wrong thing, of not having the right vocabulary, of not having enough know-how about a subject to be able to have a conversation. We're also fearful of the discomfort, this discomfort that comes from having difficult conversations around racism, around privilege, around colonization, and around knowing and understanding that we are all indeed biased. We also have the fear of taking actions and its personal consequences. For many of us, we're fearful of being seen as the token, of being the DEI or the woke police. We might even be fearful of the immense physical, emotional, and psychological impact and toll that this work actually has. And finally, we're also fearful of the lack of positive impact. It can feel like we're taking 2 steps forward and 5 steps back. So what do we need to do? Where do we go from here? And the key to making a difference is to reframe how we look at diversity, equity, and inclusion. Change the way that we look at it from a threat to an opportunity. That actually, if DEI is done right, that there's an opportunity for everybody to thrive. And you might be wondering, well, how? How do we actually make this happen? So my research shows us that there are 5 nudges that are necessary for us to really make this progress. And in my upcoming book, which is coming out next year, Can I Say That? These are the 5 nudges that we need. We need openness, curiosity, vulnerability, courage, and resilience. So let's take a look at each of these together. We start with openness. This openness is necessary for us to let go of the fear of change. And it actually starts with recognizing our privilege, recognizing the advantages that I have that others don't, recognizing all the things that I don't need to think about that others need to, and an openness to reflect deeply about what I can do to harness, use my privilege to be able to lift others. An openness to also actively seek out alternative perspectives, perspectives that are different from my own, perspectives that I may not necessarily agree with, but that I need to make space to be open to hear them, to listen to them. And finally, an openness to move from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset. We really need to move away from seeing DEI as a pizza or a pie, that if we give one piece to one group, we're taking something away from another group. When we do DEI right, there's actually space for everybody, and everyone stands to benefit. The next is curiosity, a curiosity to let go of the fear of getting it wrong. It starts with educating ourselves, understanding the gaps that we have in our understanding, in our know-how, and being able to fill that gap. Fortunately for us, there's a wealth of resources out there today to help us to be able to educate ourselves. And that also means being curious to try to understand where we might get it wrong with the language that we use, the phrases that we use, and finding ways, quick swaps in words and phrases that actually make it more inclusive for others. And finally, to engage in intelligent failures. The concept of intelligent failures comes from Professor Amy Edmondson, who's the author of the book, The Right Kind of Wrong. And for us to actually be able to let go of that fear of getting it wrong, we need to be able to engage in mistakes. We need to use those mistakes as an opportunity, those intelligent failures as an opportunity for us to grow and do better. Now, the third area, or the third nudge, is vulnerability, to let go of the discomfort that comes from the fear that we have with discomfort. And you know what, in every leadership training session that I run, I often start with this. And I say that if today in my session you don't feel some degree of discomfort, that you don't feel a pit in your stomach at some point in time, then I actually haven't done my job. So we have to get comfortable with the discomfort that comes with having these conversations. But we also need to center the discomfort of others who are marginalized, others who are experiencing discrimination. And finally, with this, we need to move away from a binary thinking. Today, we've heard Chisholm talk about the polarization in our world. You need to either support this school of thought or that school of thought. But actually, there's so much space in between to hold multiple perspectives, multiple realities as coexisting. So we need to move away from having debates to win to having these dialogues and discussions. And the fourth area is actually courage. The courage to let go of the fear of taking actions and the personal consequences of doing so. And for that, we need to start with having a clear purpose of why we are engaging in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I would really encourage each one of you in this room today to ask yourselves, why are you here? What is your purpose? What is driving you at the very core? Make a note of that, write that down, so that that is what is your anchor when it gets difficult. Now, we also have to have the courage to engage in difficult conversations in addressing bias and discrimination that we experience or witness around us. And for that, we need to hold space for having empathetic dialogues. And I'm a big fan of the power of questions. Asking the right questions at the right time, in the right tone, can be so powerful in helping other people to really unpack where their biases actually may lie. And finally, prioritizing self-care. This work is not easy. It takes a toll on us physically, mentally, and emotionally. So courage is also about prioritizing self-care, knowing that it's okay to say that I would like to take a break, that it's okay to give yourself grace. Seek out allies, seek out people who support you, and also set your boundaries. And finally, it's resilience. We've heard Laurie talk about resilience earlier today. And resilience is essential for us to let go of the fear of whether we're having a positive impact or not. And it starts with being patient. This work isn't something that's going to happen in the next year, 2 years, or the short run. We're in this for the long haul. It is going to take time. But we need to start small and build from there, and always prioritize that our efforts within our own spheres of influence are actually challenging systemic and cultural biases that exist. And finally, we need to trust in the very core purpose of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I very much firmly believe that these are the 5 nudges that are necessary for us to make progress. Now, a few months ago, I experienced fear like I've never experienced before. I came face to face with my own fears. I was harassed by a student, both verbally and physically. And in the days and the weeks that followed that, I found myself coming to terms with this immense fear. I was locking the door when I entered the house. I was scared of leaving home. I found myself second-guessing everything that I was saying in keynotes, in lectures at university, and in workshops, wondering if what I would say would trigger a negative reaction in someone in the audience. But I also found myself multiple times thinking about whether I really wanted to continue doing this work, given the immense physical, mental, and emotional toll this has taken on me. But at the same time, I happened to also be handing in the manuscript, putting the final touches on the manuscript of my latest book. And it is these 5 nudges that helped me to let go of my own fear. The openness, curiosity, vulnerability, courage, and resilience. So I firmly believe that this is what we need to be able to make that progress, to scale hope so that our workplaces and the world around us truly becomes diverse, equitable, and inclusive. Thank you. Thank you.